Let's go. Let's go. Let's go.
You
Let's
done?
go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Oh. This is my Palm Sunday dance.
All right. You done?
Happy Palm Sunday.
Welcome to the third episode of the Black Woman Podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Karryll.
And I'm Dominique.
And in today's episode, we'll be discussing self-love and self-care and how Black women have come to experience these topics in different generations. We'll also dive into how Black culture has impacted self-care, and Dominique is going to break down the title of this episode. So let's get started, and I hope you enjoy this episode.
We're here. We're here again for another episode, Karryll. Yay, yay, yay. And y'all, we're recording this is our second weekend in a row of recording. And Karryll and I decided together that we would go with what feels good. And right now, speaking for myself, it just feels good that we're in this rhythm of 2 weekends in a row of recording. So I'm proud of us.
I am. And
yay.
As soon as this is over, I'm gonna get going with the editing. That's what
get back into our pajamas.
We're gonna get uncuted.
I thought that was what you were about to say. Like, as soon as this is over, I'm getting back into my pajamas. Yeah.
Well, I'm halfway in my pajamas.
Yeah, me too. But they don't know.
They don't have to know. But we just told them, so you know.
So we arrived at self-care and self-love for this episode because, Karryll, please show us.
5, 4, 3, 2.
So y'all, we're last week, in the midst of editing, in the midst of trying to get out our second episode, Karryll says, something's wrong with my hand. You tell the story. You tell the viewers and the listeners what happened to your hand.
Okay, so guys, I was trying to do my edits while also still working full time. And so I was on the computer a lot and I used the computer mouse pad and I wasn't thinking anything of it. It started hurting Wednesday night and I woke up and it was just throbbing. And I was like, what is going on? And I was like, well, maybe I'll put some hot water, run it under hot water so it can loosen it up. And then I just kept going and going, with my day. And then it just got worse. And finally, I had to realize, I was like, wait a minute, I need to actually slow down because this isn't getting better with me just working through it. And so, I had to send our producer out to get a wrist what is it called, a wrist brace for me, and I had to ice and just basically slow down. And so here we are. It's feeling better today though, for the first time in about 3 days.
And Karryll will try to, so I didn't hear from her for a whole day, and I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. I especially when we're in the middle of edits. Yeah. And so when she texts me, I think it was late at night or early morning is when I got it. I was like, your hand, what is
I think I sent you a picture.
I knew then. Yeah, she just sent me a picture of her arm wrapped up. I knew then, okay, this is we're doing too much. And Karryll sometimes does too much.
No, I don't.
And I know I have done too much before. My body has kicked back you need to sit down. So be in the spirit of understanding when we're doing too much, this is how we arrive at self-care versus self-love.
This is real life, y'all. This is
real life. This is how we
I don't think we planned to do this episode.
No, we
didn't. Yet.
but the universe did. The universe is like, no, it's time now.
Well,
So let's dive into self-care and self-love, right?
okay.
And I teach yoga classes, and I taught a class, and the theme was self-care versus self-love.
Mm-hmm.
So you have, like, a lot of times these are terms that are just tossed around. I've noticed is like, you got to take care of yourself. You got to find some self-care. You got to find some self-love. But a lot of times people don't know what that really means.
Yes.
And so when I found out that there was a difference between self-care and self-love, I was like, oh, like, let's dive. I like this. It gives me a better understanding of what I'm doing for myself. So the way I understand it is self-love is the overall umbrella of when we're in relationship with ourselves. And when I was teaching it in this class, yoga is a union, and so it ties into the union that we have with ourselves. The self-love is the union or the marriage that we have with ourselves, and then underneath that you have self-care. So self-care comes in because you know that you have to brush your teeth, you know that you need to take a shower, you know that you need to maybe take a hot bath, or you know that you need to get a massage or a facial. That's where the self-care comes in. But the self-love is always there as a reminder of, like, you can do these things, and the self-love is giving you permission to say you can do these things and you deserve to have these levels of self-care. It's not just the fact that you wake up and take a shower and, like, that's the only care that you can give yourself.
Mm-hmm.
No, if during the middle of the day your body is starting to shut down, it's okay to step aside and go outside for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 30 minutes and just take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes we forget that because our self-love isn't strong enough to give us permission for the self-care. So I looked it up, and I just wanted to, like, get the definitions together so everyone can. So this is coming from Plenty Abundance. It's a website, Plenty Consulting Abundance.
Mm-hmm.
And it says self-love takes us into a deeper place than self-care. Self-love invites us to self-acceptance. Self-love invites us not to judge the self-care that we need. So it's giving permission. Like, it's just saying, yeah, if you want to go and spend half a day walking in the park because that's what you need, that's the care that you need for today, do that. The self-love gives you permission to do that. Self-love centers on accepting both our lovable and unlovable parts. It is intimacy with our truths, gentleness with our faults, honesty for our yearnings, and appreciation for what makes us special. Self-care is about fixing what is out of alignment in our lives. Self-love, however, is the deep knowing that at our core, there's nothing that needs fixing.
Okay. So I heard a lot of, or I thought of a lot of things when you were going over the difference between self-care and self-love. Well, the first one is it okay if I decide to just indulge in, like, snacks and ice cream because I love myself that much to indulge?
Yes.
And I've
And
considered that to be self-care.
and that's the self-care that you would take for that time.
Well, y'all heard it here, y'all. So if you see me on the couch eating some ice cream, watching some Church Mathis.
So here's the other part of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
If your body kicks back and says that was too much, then you have to also listen to that part.
Okay.
So it's care in that I'm going to sit here and I'm going to give myself permission to have this pint of ice cream or these cookies or whatever because I love them and I love myself. Absolutely do that. But if after you do that, if your body kicks back and says, I'm hurting in my stomach or my joints are starting to hurt or something else comes from that your body didn't like, that's another piece of the self-love that you have to be able to say, okay, I'm going to do these on days where I can couple it with something else. Like,
Right.
I don't know, I can get up and I can go get a massage, or I can get up and I can go walk for 20 minutes, because that's what my body needs.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's body isn't going to say that. So some people's body is going to be like, you need to sit on this couch and eat this ice cream because you've been going too much and I need you to stay here. Then that's going to happen. But like for me, if I were to do that, I would have a stomach ache after.
Mm-hmm.
And my body would be like, that was a little bit too much. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe the next time I'll have something else that can give me that sugar and that feeling, but my stomach will be happy at the same time. Does that make sense?
It does. The other thing that I thought about when you were reading or, going over the difference between self-care and self-love, it was something you said about not loving yourself enough to be okay with doing self-care or things that you need to do for your self-care. And I thought that
Yeah.
was so interesting because I think that doesn't only apply to like self-care, but also in maybe even relationships that people are in. Like, how they say, like, you can tell that they need to work on their self-love because if you don't, or because they are in this type of relationship, that just is an indication that they don't really have as much love for themselves as they should because of the treatment that they're receiving. So I thought that was
Yeah.
interesting that you said that. And honestly, when we talked about literally talked about this yesterday, when we were talking about like the difference between self-care and self-love, I think I kind of thought of them as being two different entities as opposed to self-love being the umbrella. Like,
Yeah.
but I still thought of it as, so like with self-care and how I view it and how I define it and how I conceptualize it, I think of what you said when, like you have to brush your teeth. You need to make sure you're eating properly so that your body gets the right nutrients, or you need to make sure your hygiene is up to par. Like if you need to take a shower, take a shower. If you need more rest, then that's self-care. And for self-love, I thought of it as basically just doing things to show appreciation for yourself. So like appreciating, every inch of your body. So appreciating your eyes, the shape of your lips, your body type,
Yeah.
your hair texture, your, how big your hands could be, that's kind of what I thought of
Yeah.
when it came to self-love, but not necessarily the ability to accept when it's time for you to implement self-care for your own well-being. And I think that's so important. And I feel like today's society has been more accepting of self-care because we hear about how people sometimes, if they're working too much, they'll take a mental health day. I'm telling you right now, back in the day, they didn't have that. Like they weren't
No.
weren't doing that. They just kind of had to work through it. So I appreciate the fact that we are getting to a point where it's okay to be seen as humans, as
I agree.
we're all humans. We all have our days. We all need space to process things if stuff's going on in our personal lives. Um, so yeah.
I agree. I think also though, um, self-care has definitely been commercialized to a point where self-love doesn't have room all the time. And so what I mean by that is like, yes, people want to take care of themselves, but they're taking care of themselves to look a certain way, to look like somebody else. And I think self-love comes down to like, it comes down to intimacy. It comes down to like, and in yoga, we have this saying like intimacy is broken down into me, I see. And so looking inside of yourself, like when you can start to really do that, you'll find out that some of the practices of quote unquote self-care that we're taught, you may not even like, and so like there's so many ways to find self-care
Mhm.
that extend beyond getting a pedicure and a manicure, and like
Mhm.
those are cool, but there's so many other ways to practice care for yourself that you find out only in intimacy with yourself.
Mm. Yeah.
So
No, and I agree because I think it was, I would say like at the beginning of the pandemic, because before everything was just kind of go, go, go. And then when we got into the pandemic, we were forced to slow down.
yeah.
And in the beginning, I realized like part of my self-care was just sitting on my back porch and just enjoying the
See?
sounds of nature. I love doing that.
Oh my gosh, Carol, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I remember when you told me, when I called you one time and you were like, I'm on the back porch, sitting under the awning, like listening to the birds. I was like, you're sitting on the back porch, like doing nothing. Like my brain was saying that, but I didn't say that out of my mouth. I was like, oh, that's cool. But I was like, when did this happen?
I know, child. I just
Because you
discovered it.
never expressed that. Like you never, yeah. So that's what I
Well,
mean.
yeah, and honestly, I don't think I expressed it because I didn't realize that that was something that I actually enjoyed doing until
Right.
I sat and like really, I was just quiet and just thinking like, you know what, I really like sitting out on the back porch.
Yeah.
Like not having to do anything, not have to interact with people, child, my neighbors be walking around. I'm like,
Yeah.
sometimes I try to hide behind behind the fence so they don't see me.
Exactly.
Because I
Yeah.
just want to be in my element and be peaceful. But
That's a perfect example. And that's not a commercialized thing, but that is the
right.
highest level of self-care.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
So as we continue on this, what is your definition of taking care of Carol? Like, how do you take care of Carol yourself?
So, okay, the first I've already talked about sitting on the back porch.
Yes.
I'm very intentional, even though the summertime in North Carolina can be torture with the heat. But I still make a point to make sure we go to the beach at least 3 times a year because I just love taking a nap on the beach and just listening to the ocean waves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing that you and our other friend, I'll drop a name. Our other friend got me into was massages. Before I didn't really
Uh,
think like
uh,
massages could be
mm.
part of self-care. I thought it was just like something you could just give somebody a gift for a birthday or
See?
a holiday. But now, honey child, they know me at my massage salon. They know
Y'all, I think she goes like twice a month, 3 times a month.
at least 3 times a month, and I get a
Yeah.
90 massage. Okay. And my masseuse, she has magical hands. I'm not gonna say her name because if anybody in North Carolina in my area is listening, you might try to book with her, and then I'm gonna be mad because she already is like booked out. So, but yeah. So for me, self-care is really just doing things that make me happy. And a lot
Mm.
of times, because you and our producer and some of my other friends, you guys come down on me for like things that I enjoy doing. Like the other day or yesterday, I was talking about how I wanted to detail my car. And I don't know if it was you, but
No, it wasn't me.
okay, well, it would have been you if you knew about it. But
I'm like, I was not in that conversation.
okay, well, I don't know who it was, but I know I think Jason was part of it and somebody else. And they were all looked at me like, you want to detail your car? And I enjoy doing stuff like that. I enjoy going out and doing yard work. I enjoy trying to figure out how to do projects around the house. Like I love to paint. In our house, I painted 5 rooms. And I would have painted the outer like the open area, but it was too high and Jason wouldn't let me get on the ladder like I wanted to do, but that's a whole nother story. Because I thought it
That's
was
fair. That's fair. I hear you with that. I think I have done that before and said to you, That's not, you should just hire somebody to do that. I've definitely
Yes,
done that too
and
before. Yeah,
you have
I
said to
have.
me, I need to hire a cleaning person. And while I don't necessarily have the time to do that, I still enjoy cleaning. It is therapeutic. I put on my music and I just go to work.
Okay, but here's the other side of that, and maybe our listeners can relate. Karryll works full time.
I think we
She
all
is
do.
also she is also a wife. She is also a dog mom. And so that is a lot. That means she has a lot of roles that may be happening all at the same time. So she says some of these things and she's tired because she just put in a whole week's worth of work. And so what we do is try to say, hey, and the other part of that is her body is also saying no. Let me
Okay.
be clear.
Okay.
Her body will say, no, I don't want to do this by doing various things. And she'll still say, no, I'm going to clean this. I'm going to push and do this.
Because I do what I want to do.
That's when I step in and say, I think you should hire somebody. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to get somebody else to do that. So that's why I come in saying something.
Okay.
And maybe our listeners can say, oh yeah, I can relate to that. So it's a balance. It's trying to find that balance.
Okay. I'm still
So
not gonna
that's
listen.
my thing.
The only time I listen is when my body yell at me. Okay.
Okay, and y'all, if y'all are watching, you see the brace. She just showed it.
It's
So
gonna come up this week though, I
she
think.
just showed the brace.
It's
So
gonna come off.
if you see her painting in your neighborhood with this brace on, maybe y'all can talk to her. I don't know.
Or if you, because I'm about to go detail my car after we record this episode too. But go
Okay.
ahead though. So what
All
is
right.
your definition? How does Dominique do self-care? And I feel like Dominique does an excellent job of practicing self-care.
Ooh.
Now she has
Okay.
learned, honey. Okay.
So, my self care comes in many, many different forms.
I know it do.
Um, Sometimes I tell people I cannot go to certain things because I have a meeting, and the meeting is with myself.
Listen,
And
don't be giving
now
out
they
your
know.
secrets now.
Now they know. And I don't mind because if they ask what type of meeting it is, I'll tell them it's with myself. Um, Sometimes my self care is during the middle of the day. I will go to my favorite parks. Oh my goodness, I have so many now. I'll go to my favorite park and I'll park and I'll eat my lunch in the back seat of my car because it makes me feel like I'm in a little space away from somewhere.
Okay.
And then I'll take a walk. And I set up my days so that I have like at least 2.5 hours of time for a lunch break.
Wait, did you say 2 to 2.5 hours?
Yes. And so I take my lunch break. Also, if our listeners don't know, I am not a 9 to 5 girl at all.
Me
40
either,
hours,
child. I was not built for that.
not for me. I'm not sitting at any type of desk. I do have a
Uh-uh.
desk in my
Get
office,
somebody
and
else to do it.
I sit there for maybe an hour. But I just wasn't built like that. And so when I discovered self-care through yoga, like from our previous episodes, from my heart palpitations, that really set me on the path of being like, oh my gosh, there's so many ways that I can take care of myself. And I'll be honest, it started out just with self-care. So I would go to yoga classes. There was one point where I was going to 2 and 3 yoga classes a day.
I think I remember
And
that.
sitting in the sauna afterwards, like I was really heavy on detoxing my body. Um, and so I was just doing the things. I was just doing like the self-care portion of it. But I didn't have the deepest portion, which was the self-love. And so that was when meditation came in heavy for me. And now my meditation practice is it's my umbrella, it's my self-love, and it taps into my self-care because after I meditate, I'll know like, okay, today I just need to take it easy, or today I can go full on and get everything done that I need to get done. And so meditation is a little bit of both for me. It's the self-love. I think I would say meditation is my umbrella. It's my self-love. And then and it also taps into self-care. But yeah, my meditation, I meditate for an hour, and it's like I charge myself. It's like I plug into the wall and I sit, and then I come out.
I love it.
Yeah. Other things that I discovered, the other thing I discovered, earthing. I discovered that in the pandemic, taking your shoes off and walking on the grass and on the pavement barefoot, honey, in the sand. Oh my gosh. Like after that, I will take a nap for like 30 minutes. It charges you up. Like it's almost as if like you plug, like I was saying, like I plug myself into the wall. It's like you charge, the earth will literally charge you up when you take your shoes off and you just take your socks off. I do that with my clients a lot. And they look at me like I'm crazy, and I tell them, go stand in the grass.
Okay, so I'm with you with the sand.
Yes.
However, I don't think I can get with you with the cement and the grass because I'm a dog owner. I know what goes down in the grass.
Just scoop all the poop out the way. And at some point there was dog poop where you're standing. So stand there, and it's already gone into the earth. It's already, did its processing and all of that stuff. What do you think? The dirt that you're touching just magically never touched poop?
Get somebody else to do it, because I ain't gonna do that now. Okay, because if I come
when
home with hepatitis A or B or C, D, F, G,
when I come
H,
to North Carolina, we're gonna walk on the pavement.
Those are lies. Okay. It's not gonna happen. I will wear my shower shoes outside in the grass.
And see, that creates the disconnect.
So I'm gonna just be disconnected, child. You're gonna have to give me an outlet and I can recharge myself that way. Okay, let me stop.
That's how she operates. That's why we have to step in sometimes. Okay. All right. So how do you see self-care with the Black women in your life, Karryll?
So, okay. I would say self-care with women who are the same age as me. I see that. And it looks different for whoever it is. Like, one of my friends who is a major executive at a major company. I can't remember if it's a Fortune 500 company, but it probably is. But like, she likes to travel. So that is something that she's intentional about. She also likes to do travel with her family. Like right now she's doing like a spring break trip with her family to Tennessee, and they're spending time there. So that's just like one example. A lot of like my mentee, who I've talked about, and I'm going to have her come on the podcast, but she has said she practices self-care, if not daily, every other day. So she works full time, but she also makes sure, like, if I need a day off, I'm going to take that day off. Or if I
love her.
Yes. And I admire that about her, because when I was her age, I was not thinking that I needed to. I just recently came into self-care, if we want to be honest. And I feel like it went into you and how you talked about self-love and not being okay with letting yourself practice self-care. So once I got to that point, and I feel like I'm a work in progress, but once I got to that, I'm like, I don't care. Like, I need this for myself, because if not, y'all gonna get a different version of me that you think does not exist, but it does. As far as like the older women or the older generation of Black women that I grew up, looked up to, I don't know if I can pinpoint what self-care is for them. I'll use my mom as an example. I know one of the things that she likes to do is watch PBS. She likes to, she would like to go to antique shows, like the little festivals where they have the antiques.
Yeah.
She likes to buy antiques and collect them and stuff like that. But I don't know if she would practice that on a regular because she just had so much going on, raising 2 kids, working full time, and then her commute to work was a lot. Once we graduated, she was able to get an apartment so that she didn't have to spend so much time commuting back and forth. But even that, it's like she worked a 9 to 5 or
Mm-hmm.
8 to 5 or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times she would get off work and she'd be tired. And
Yeah.
me working full time, I mean, I do work full time, but
She's doing air quotes, y'all,
oh
working
yeah,
full time.
sorry. I'm working full time, but a lot of times I have the flexibility to work from,
Yeah.
where kind of I
Yeah.
choose. And she necessarily didn't have that option. And so
Mm-hmm.
if I had to think about going to the office every day and then coming home and maybe doing self-care or something that I wanted to do, say go to a park or something, I would be tired. I would be
Yeah.
too tired to practice self-care. And even though
Yeah.
resting could be part of self-care, but it's also, you just needed it. That was just something that you would need at that moment, but maybe not necessarily what you always wanted to do. Maybe you wanted to do more, but you couldn't. So,
Mm-hmm.
for the older women in my lives, I don't know if I see that.
Yeah. Yeah, I would have to agree. The Black women in my life, I'm grateful that I have a balance of Black women, Black friends who, like, all of y'all take care of yourselves in different ways and ways that work for you. So,
Mhm.
like, we have a friend, she is heavy into meditation and like being outside and hiking. And so I learned a lot from her before I actually got into meditation.
Mhm.
Um, and then I have another friend, she's a lot into like energy work and healing yourself from, like what people would say the woo woos, like
Mhm.
like communicating with the ancestors. Like there's a
Mhm.
lot of self-care that happens in that, just spending time with self.
Mhm.
Um and I learned early, like thankfully early on, we have a friend, she taught me about like the massages and getting the manicures and pedicure, like that was like a little seed that was planted for me in
Yes.
terms of like what I should and could do for myself.
Mm.
um and then, I still have some friends who it's a struggle for them. Like
Mhm.
self-care is hard. Self-care is hard to do.
It is.
And so yeah, that's what it is. But I'm grateful that we have conversation around self-care.
Mhm.
And when one of us is like down or out, or in this case, the reason for this episode was because of Carol's arm. Um, and your body is always telling you these little moments. And so I'm grateful that I have a beautiful network of Black women around me who are going to be like, hey, Dominique, you're always telling us about X, Y, and Z, but maybe it sounds like you need to do something or slow down or whatever it needs to be.
Mhm.
So I'm grateful for that. Older Black women in my life, their self-care, I was joking with Carol about this, like the only self-care I saw from my great grandmother was she would put Vaseline on everything. Okay. It was Vaseline, or I don't know, some of y'all may or may not know about this, but my granny used to put WD-40 on her body, which is car oil. I, pro- I promise you. She would put WD-40 on her arthritis, like on her knees, on her like that is the extent of the self-care that I saw.
Well, wait a
And
minute. Did it help?
I guess it did because she continued with it. I was too, and again, I'm too young to be like, is this a good method of self care? Like, who's saying
Child,
that? Nobody.
listen,
So,
listeners, if there's anybody out there listening, watching, if you have tried this, leave a comment in the comment section and let us know if that worked. Because that might be a little
That might be that might
we
be
gotta
something.
tap into when we get to that age,
Right.
Okay.
And so fortunately, when I was born, my great grandmother was still living. And so my grandmother and my great grandmother, I didn't see a lot of self-care from them. I just saw them hustle. I saw like my great grandmother had businesses that she was running. Like there was no time, like Karryll said, when that was done, they were tired.
Yeah.
And so I don't think they were trying to save, they were trying to make sure like the next thing would get done. And for my grandmother, my mom's mom, she she went back to school, she was working, she had 3 kids, she was working and going to school with 3 kids. So self-care came in when?
Yeah.
I don't know when it came in. I remember my grandmother, my mom's mom would always, she's still living, my mom's mom would always get her nails done and her feet done. Like she would take us to get our nails done and stuff. So that was when I started to see self-care come in. But anything outside of that, I'm like, Karryll, I can't really pinpoint something that was done.
Yeah.
And then it started to get much better with my mom. Like I was able to introduce her to yoga, and from there my mom just took off with it. Like she's a huge advocate with juicing. That's her self-care. She'll go out for walks. She likes to shop. She's a shopper and she loves good deals. So yeah, so the self-care kind of like it builds as it came down through each generation. So
yeah. Okay.
So yeah, so that, I mean, and you guys let us know what your experience with Black women in self-care may or may not have been.
Yeah, I feel like we should do a live on that. That would be interesting.
I know, we should.
Or maybe even just a poll,
Yeah.
how you do on.
I think we'll do that. I think I'll put a poll on Instagram. So what does self-care mean as it relates to the Black woman's experience? So now we're tying it all together. And I think you and I both touched on that in terms of they didn't have time. They were tired. And that is the experience of the Black woman.
Yeah.
Is that she is tired. And yes, she wants to go out and go for these walks. Yes, she wants somebody to come and clean the house. But it's also been set up by our society that we have to one up, that we have to double down, that if we don't speak up, we're not going to be heard. So do you want to speak to that?
So I was sitting here trying to figure out how to articulate, my perception of, what does self-care mean as it relates to the Black woman's experience. And I just feel like, I mean, it's kind of like what we talked about, where I feel like our older generation of Black women, we didn't necessarily see it. And another thing that I was going to mention when you were talking about your grandmother and how she would take y'all to get your nails done, right? Sometimes I wonder though, like if your perception of that being self-care was really her self-care. Like maybe she was doing it to just, okay, let's do something. And not necessarily something that she enjoys. Because I don't like going to the nail salon. You know my experience.
I know. I know you do not. I learned that the hard way.
Okay.
For my grandma specifically, though, she loves it. Like to this day, she has a family, and I apologize that I don't know their last name, but they are the nicest family. They own 2 nail shops in Detroit, and they're Asian. I don't know exactly what country they're from, but when I tell y'all they embody community, they come and pick my grandma up every 2 weeks from her home, drive to her house, pick her up, and take her to the nail shop. She never has to wait. Whoever's there, they're out of line. she goes and she sits in the chair
She
and
got
they do her
VIP.
nails. She has VIP. They do her nails, they do her feet, they feed her. So they bring food from home, they will feed her. She's sitting in the chair, she's on her phone playing games. And then when she's done, they dry her nails, they do all the things, and they drive her back home. And they do this every 2 weeks. She spent Christmas with them last year because she was mad at us.
Oh,
She spent
goodness.
Christmas with them. This family is like, and I have to get the name of the shop. I am going to get the name of the shop, and I'm going to put it on this episode because they are, I mean, it literally takes a village. It takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to help with when you have elders in your family and you need help with that takes a village. And so yes, to answer your question, I answered it the long way. She enjoys the nail shop.
Yeah. Okay.
She enjoys it. Now when I went, they didn't do my nails, but
like you an outsider,
we're all for it.
Okay.
But yeah, that was her way of, she actually enjoyed it.
Yeah. And then another thing that I thought about with, this question, would be, depending on the stage of life that you're in, how do you continue to practice self-care? If that makes sense. Like when I was in grad school, I had a lot of time on my hands. Okay. I practiced self-care a lot. It looked very different.
Yeah.
And then once I did graduate, I had a lot of time on my hands then, because I was looking for a job. And then now that I'm working full time, it's almost like I have to be intentional. I don't want to say very intentional, but I have to be intentional about practicing self-care and making sure I make time, which can sometimes, and for me, I can get so busy with life and adulting that I just forget, And so I think I appreciate my circle of sisters, the sisterhood that I have with, you women, because y'all will remind me that, okay, when is the next time y'all gonna go to Jamaica? Or when is the next time? Well, I mean, I keep up with my massage appointments, but other things that I want to do, that go into my self-care. And so, I think about that for other Black women who, sometimes they may not make that a priority.
Yeah.
Because they're so busy and making sure that things are good at home, good at work, and good at, if they have children, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think going into that, like oftentimes I have seen Black women make self-care for others more of a priority than it is for themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that's how we circle back to the understanding of self-love.
Right.
Because, getting to know yourself and really loving yourself, you realize that the only person that's going to take care of me in the way that I need it is me. And so that means saying no. That means, finding somebody to help, or like, even if it's just 30 minutes, giving yourself time, sitting in the car before you go in somewhere for like 30 minutes, turning everything off. Like when I teach yoga teacher training programs, that's one of the things that they have to do is have a yoga meal, which means you sit down and you eat with no distractions, like not watching the TV. You don't have your phone out. You're not reading a book. Just sit and enjoy the meal. And that's self-care. Like noticing how your food actually tastes is a level of self-care at this point, because most of us, myself included, are sitting and like shoveling food into our mouths. Just slowing down is another level of self-care, to be like, whoa, I don't feel right, or I'm doing too much, like just slowing it down can help, so you can tap into what you really, really need. And taking care of others is, yes, we need each other, but it's also, it can be exhausting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one thing I want you to talk about is how you came to be unapologetic with self-care, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I said it twice,
So I
but
know.
you are very unapologetic when it comes to practicing self-care. And I know, tell us who you learned that from.
Okay, so here's the truth.
Okay.
When I started getting into the yoga field, and I was, doing yoga teacher training, and I would be at conferences, yoga conferences and yoga workshops, I was starting to see like a theme, which was, many times I was the only Black person in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the white women I was with, they had families, they had 3 and 4 kids, they were working. Some of them weren't working, some of them were stay-at-home moms, but they were in the same room I was in for the same amount of time,
Mm-hmm.
and giving themselves time to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I started to notice, and I was like, man, my friends think I'm great, because at this point, y'all, I think I was like in my mid 20s and later. At this point, my friends were like, Dominique, where do you find this time? And they didn't have kids, but they were getting married, but it wasn't like life was running very fast.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I was like, okay, my friends have stuff going on, but so do I. And I make time for this. I don't know. I could never understand, but I was trying to understand. But it always seemed like my friends had so much going on that they couldn't make time for these things.
Mm-hmm.
And so the joke, y'all, was that Dominique always makes time for self-care. But I was learning, I was learning from the white women that I was with in these yoga spaces. And I was like, y'all, you have what?
Mm-hmm.
And you're doing what? And you're here, and you're making this a priority.
Yeah.
And I also learned that if they needed to take a break or step away from something, they would send an email and step away.
Put on that out of office.
And I would try to tell my friends, y'all, like my little Black self, I was going back to my community and being like, listen, this is what they're doing. I was like, this is what they're doing. And I mean this lovingly to all of our white listeners. I was like, this is what the white women are doing. They're saying, no, I'm not going to do that. It doesn't serve me. I need a whole day to sit and be, and be present. And I'm going to my husband has the kids, and like, I have one good friend now, like when I go to visit, her husband makes dinner. He has breakfast, lunch, and dinner every time. And we sit at the table and we wait patiently for him to get the meal. And he works too. And she just worked. But it's like, it's a difference that I was noticing. And I was like, this is how my life is going to be. And so I'm going to start with myself, and my partner will, like, he will understand. Yeah. And that's where it really, the seeds were planted for me. And I didn't realize that until Karryll and I have had conversations about it. And she was like, Dominique, you always say that, like, this is what you hear, this is what you interact with. And I mean it sincerely, because I'm like, we can do this.
Yes.
We as Black women can do this, and we deserve this. And so some days if I wake up and I'm just not feeling it, I send an email that says, I'm not feeling it today.
Yeah.
And we're going to move some stuff. And I don't feel guilty about it, because the seed was planted a while back when I first started yoga. And I was seeing all these white women who were doing it, and they were like, just don't do it, Dominique. And I was like, yeah, I'm just not going to do it.
So,
then afterwards, I would move stuff around, and I had to adjust things, but I felt good.
Yeah.
Like I felt like, oh, I didn't understand at the time. I was loving myself,
Mm-hmm.
but that act of self-care was like, oh, I gave myself permission to do something that was a little edgy. Like I broke a rule, but everything was fine after.
Right.
So, yeah, so that's where I learned my seeds of self-care.
Okay. And I'll add and say, well, first of all, the seed for me, it keeps being uprooted. So there are times when I got to figure out how to put it back into the ground so that it stays. And but I learned from you to learn from white women that I work with, if that makes sense. Child. So
Yeah.
I'll say one of my jobs that I have a friend who's a white woman. I love her so much. She's so sweet. I run a lot of stuff by her. Like if there
Mm-hmm.
is service that I need to do or things or tasks that I need to do, I'm like, hey, what do you think about this? And she will be like, no, I really don't think, like, I think you should be focusing on this. And I think that's going to take too much of your time. Like she will guide me as far as like what I should and what I shouldn't be focusing on. And I
Yeah.
so appreciate that because if it was me only, I would just be saying yes to everything. And she
Mm.
really did teach me how to say no. And I think part of it was because she learned the hard way, kind of getting, tasked with a lot of things. And
Mm-hmm.
so because she went through it, she was able to kind of mentor me and be like, no, you don't need to be doing that. That's just too much. You're already doing a lot. I was just like,
I love that.
okay, yes. I'm telling you, I love it. And, I'm still getting to the point where, I mean, I'm a work in progress, but I'm still working on not feeling bad about it, you
Mm.
know?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes my feelings of feeling bad about it go away when it's not challenged when I say no to something, if that makes sense.
So what do you, so like if you say no and the person pushes back, then you feel bad.
Yes.
Okay.
And then I'm just like,
That's fair.
I feel guilty. I'm like, should I be doing this? I'll second guess
Yeah.
my decision because I'm just,
Yeah.
wondering if this is something I should be doing or,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah.
And I'm glad you brought that up because I've noticed, and I have done this too, like when people push back,
Mm,
start to second guess, and
yes.
that's when they can insert, there's that little opening for them to insert themselves and be like, it's just for 5 minutes or it's
Right.
just for 30 minutes. And it's in that moment that I have literally had to talk to myself. It's in that moment where as Black women we have to double down and say, I said what I said.
Right.
And there's no need for explanation.
Yes.
There's no need to, because I know the Black women in my family have been like, come on, I'll
Mm-hmm.
do it.
Mm-hmm.
Or I know Black women who will be like upset and be like, you didn't even tell me you were going to do this, like fussing,
Right.
but still doing it.
Mm.
And at the end of the day, it comes down to we have to stand in our our level of self-love, in our
Right.
own self-love and say, no,
Right.
I I gave you my answer and that's it.
Yeah.
And when I have done that, I've gained so much more respect.
That happened to me at work, one of my jobs. Well,
Yeah.
that person is no longer there, but they were trying to get me to take on a major role at work. And I already and maybe to be fair, they didn't know everything that I had going on because it wasn't just in that department that I was working in. I was doing stuff
Yes.
outside. And so when they asked me, I just responded and said, here's a list of what I have going on and what I have coming up. And this is, and I probably shouldn't have done that because it was me explaining myself.
Mm.
But again, like when I did that, they responded and say, oh, I see you're doing a lot, never mind. That's okay. And that was it. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't think they came to ask me, to do anything else, not because they didn't want, or they didn't think that I could do it, but because they knew I was already doing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like in that example, it was respecting my time, so to
Yeah.
speak, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so moving on from that, oh, the other thing I wanted to mention about self-care, because you and I talked about this. So one of the big things about me is that I don't drink. Like I don't drink alcohol at all. It just doesn't agree with my body.
Yeah.
And I know for some people that's a level of self-care, right? Like going home and having a glass of wine. You can hear it all over. Like the American Heart Association says it's okay. My grandma reminds me all the time. Okay, she's 85 and she makes sure that she has her glass of wine a day. But for me, it doesn't feel good in my body. And I like to be, I know that yoga has brought me to a place where I'm very aware of my body. And when something goes in it that makes me feel like I'm out of balance in any way, I don't like that. And that's how alcohol makes me feel, any alcohol. And I've been in spaces where, we've gone out and the conversation comes back to, oh, Dominique, you're not drinking. And I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm okay. And I'm very comfortable with my water and my lemon and no ice because I don't like cold water.
Room temperature water.
My room temperature water, unless I'm working out. Then I know my body needs to cool down. But I'm very fine and I'm cheersing and I'll get a wine glass and put some water in it and put a little sparkling something in it. But I noticed that it causes discomfort for people that are not familiar with me or that are new to like me hanging out with them or being in social settings with them. And y'all, I will be out on the dance floor with everybody else who is drinking, but I don't have to put it in my body. And so I've seen that in different spaces where, especially recently, I was talking to Karryll about this, and it's almost like people are justifying for themselves the reason why I don't drink. Like they would say, oh, you don't drink because it makes you sick, but you could drink wine if you wanted to. And I was like, I just sat back. I was like, where are these? Like, are you questioning me or yourself? Like, it's almost like they're doing this dance of like, she doesn't do this because it's going to make her sick. Because she could choose to do it with me, but she's choosing. And so I just want people to understand that self-care, it can show up in many different forms. And whatever your self-care is, let that be okay.
Right.
Like, love yourself enough to be at the table and say, today or forever, y'all won't see me drinking, but I will still be in fellowship with y'all. Like I will still be in community. I hang out with my friends all the time and they drink and do their thing. And I'm right there. I am a great designated driver and I love that role. Okay. And I will have the music on. Everything will be cleared in the back seat. Y'all have waters and everything. Call me Uber. Call me whatever.
Uber DD.
Yeah, Uber DD. But that's the other part of self-care is like being able to stand in it and love yourself enough to stand in it when other people are questioning.
Right.
And they're only questioning it because maybe it struck a chord in them.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just the other part that you and I were discussing. And that seems to be a big one, especially nowadays.
Right. Yeah.
So what has the Black culture, going back to Black culture, right? What has Black culture taught or diminished about self-care? And there's this ride or die mentality that we'll tap into a little bit, but what has Black culture taught or diminished about self-care?
I'm not sure if it historically has taught us to practice self-care.
Yep.
I think it definitely has diminished us practicing self-care. And I've had friends who, have had to set boundaries with
Mm,
family because, maybe they don't want, maybe a tradition in their family was always having Sunday dinner. And part of their self-care was, okay, I need to get ready for the week. I don't want to have Sunday dinner with you every week on Sunday because
mm-hmm.
this is my day to prepare for the week. That means maybe I need to do laundry, maybe I need to meal prep for the week, or maybe I need
Yeah.
to just do nothing because I know
Mm-hmm.
whatever I have coming up is going to be a lot. And so I think we as a culture are still struggling with that because I feel like it may be easier for us to practice it with those who are not family or, blood
Mm-hmm.
family,
Yeah.
as opposed to, our family who may look at us, oh, well, you can't come over or you can't do this for me, or I need you to run to the store. And it's like, no, I need my own personal space so that I can be okay to take care of what I need to. You know what I mean? And so
Mm-hmm.
um I think as a culture, we still have a ways to go when it comes to practicing self-care, if that makes sense.
I agree 100%. Yeah. Um, when I think about how you said it has not taught us self-care, I think that historically, if we go back to
Yes.
why,
Yes.
it's because of slavery.
Oh,
It's
absolutely.
because we were captured and we were beaten and we were brought to a land that was foreign.
Mm-hmm.
So there was no care in anything in that
No,
process.
absolutely
And
not.
when we arrived in bodies that had been traumatized.
Mm-hmm.
And we arrived in bodies that were then just trying to survive.
Right.
So we went into fight or flight mode, and that continued through the bloodline. And
Mm-hmm.
there was no space or time to talk about self-care. You were in survival.
Right.
And one thing that my one of my she's a friend to me now, but she used to come to my yoga classes and I have to remember how to say her name. But I'm going to get it right one time. She's Asian American, and she said self instead of trying to perfect self-care, we need to tap into community care.
Mm.
And I love that, right?
Mm.
And I think Black people, that's what we came from, is community care. If you
Mm-hmm.
go to like in the Bahamas, there's a lot of community care in the smaller islands. Like that's where people are walking barefoot. That's where people have their farms. That's where there's more, and that can be a heightened level of self-care. But I think we are starting to get back to community care as Black people.
Yeah.
But you're right, self-care, we didn't have time for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I'm thankful for y'all that we have been so intentional
Mm-hmm.
with finding time for self-care. And I think for all of us, like the sisterhood that we have, it's definitely community care for
Absolutely.
sure.
Absolutely. And just to add, going back to slavery, if you think about it, if you think about the different time periods, of course, during slavery, we literally were in survival mode. But even after we were freed, um, we
She's
still were,
doing air quotes.
sorry, air quotes, we still were in survival mode, you know.
Yes.
And then moving forward, we had Jim Crow, still in survival
Yes.
mode.
Still.
Fast forward to the civil rights movement, still in survival mode.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
even past that, you had the 90s, 80s, 90s crack epidemic, still in survival mode.
Okay. So now
And
we have a
then,
thing.
right. And okay. And even in
Yeah.
today's society, we
Yeah.
kind of sort of still in survival mode.
Yes. Like we
And
have to. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say it's just been passed down from generation to generation. And
Yes.
so, I think now we are trying to break that
Mm-hmm.
generational survival mode mentality. But we still have a ways to go.
Yeah. And I like what you said about you have to be so intentional with the self-care.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to be intentional with it, but it starts with the umbrella of self-love. Like you
Mm-hmm.
have to be intentional with loving yourself. So then you can understand the bigger picture of saying, okay, I do need to change some things.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay for me to relax a little bit. I think in our Black culture, it's this
Yeah.
heightened feeling of like, I gotta grind. I'm not gonna sleep. I'm gonna get my 8 hours and then I'll deal with y'all later. That's how I see
Yeah, no,
it.
and you're right, because listening to you, it made me think of when I was, of course, back in grad school, and sometimes they would have social events after, I guess, working. I'm doing air quotes again.
Mm-hmm.
Um, where we would go to different faculty members' homes and have like a social hour, dinner, and drinks and stuff like that. And I remember I'm like, no, that's not going to give me no self-care, because I still
Mm-hmm.
got to perform. One of the
Exactly.
reasons why I have been adamant, and I've said this in previous episodes, that I am going to be who I am, is because that's part of my self-care. And it's part of
Mm,
my
mm,
self-love
mm,
as well.
mm, mm. That's a
Coming
quote
to it.
that will be on
Ew.
Instagram very soon.
Ew.
Say that one
Um,
again. Say that one again for those in the back.
Yes, like part of me being who I am is part of my self-care, and part of, and under the umbrella of self-love, because if I have
Mm-hmm.
to mask who I am, how I talk, my personality, that's exhausting for me.
Mm-hmm.
That's a I don't want to say like a detriment to my overall well-being, but it could be,
Mm-hmm.
because I'll feel exhausted, and then emotionally and psychologically it's like, well, I can't be who I am, because this isn't the environment, or this isn't what acceptable in society. And so, you know I would really say that definitely when I was in college, I was able to grow into being to really coming into self-love for myself and self-care.
Mm-hmm.
Grad school, it kind of took a beating, but now I don't care. This is who I am. And
Yeah.
that's part of my self-care and self-love. So
Yeah. I love that. I love that you own who you are. And as you say, I'm going to be crazy.
I'll be crazy and ignorant all day, y'all.
And then you will read someone.
Yeah.
Okay. And
like
for
like a
those of you
third
that
grade elementary school book. Okay.
so for those of you that do not know, this is Dr. Phillips, just so everyone knows. And so when she reads you, she will
Mm.
read you from a PhD. I'm just saying, and
All
I can be the one that's going to toot her horn. Okay.
right now. Too tuned.
So how do you know when it's time to pause?
Child, that's the easy one for
Or
me. Oh.
or do you know when it's time to pause?
Oh, okay. One, I do know, because my body will tell me. I have gone
Mm-hmm.
through I have gone through ankle issues, knee issues, back issues, neck issues, now wrist issues, and it's because I will do too much. And to answer
Mm-hmm.
the second part, no, I don't know. And I don't know when
Mm-hmm.
it's time to pause. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Um, and I think I don't know, like, and I guess, just sitting here reflecting and doing this episode, maybe I do too much sometimes, but I like doing that.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. Like after this, I'm gonna go to the grocery store, come back, detail my car, go wash my hair, and then get ready for the week. Now, am I being a little too optimistic? Maybe. But the type
Mm-hmm.
of person I am, I feel like it's gonna happen.
Yeah. And it could be that you're doing too much. Your body is already telling you or has already told you it's in a splint. It's,
It's gonna
your
come
body
out.
has already showed you to slow down. So, the pause is hard.
It
The
is.
pause is sitting with yourself. The pause is getting more into understanding whether you love all parts of yourself, which parts of yourself you don't love. Um, the pause is hard because when we have to sit with our thoughts, that's a very scary place for many of us.
Yes.
And so, yeah, the pause is hard. And even for me, it's a challenge. Sometimes I feel myself though. I'm grateful for my meditation practice because when I'm going too much, like if I get too excited, it feels off. Like I feel like, oh man, I'm not focused. Like I don't have the laser like focus when I'm too excited. It's almost like my body is hyper and I need to slow it down. And that happens when I don't meditate. When I do meditate, I can go from like being like, I can have joy and excitement, and then I can also drop it down to like just calm down and be still. And I can balance the two like in seconds. When I don't meditate, I feel like I'm just floppy all over the place. And I need to pause. And when I do sit, I do know when it's time to pause. Do I always do it at the time that my body says it needs to happen? No, I don't. And that's a practice. That's something that I have to learn, but have to continue to learn. But yeah, the pause is hard. I talk to many people and they're like, oh my gosh, my thoughts are just not a good place to go or to be.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's inside of us. Like we have to explore the thoughts. And granted, there are some people that you don't want to dive into that too soon because, there are mental processes and issues that are very much alive and happening. So I'm aware of that. Meditation's not for everybody. But yeah, it's a challenge. But once you sit with it and you let it like pass, you're like, oh, it's not so bad. I'm okay.
Yeah. So, as you were talking, it made me think about, why it's so hard to pause. And I wonder if it's because of the society that we live in. Like, child, when I go to the island, Jamaica's my first home.
Yes, it is.
It is. I'm still gonna get a job, give me a house there, and I'm be braiding hair on the beach, and that's gonna be my life. But when I'm there, everything is just so like, just calm down. Like, we gonna get to it,
Yeah.
And so I just wonder if it's a societal or cultural thing in the States where we just gotta go, go, go. I mean, because we saw it with the pandemic.
Yeah.
When everything slowed down, and to me, it was a good slowdown. Like I appreciated the slowdown. I'm not really familiar with like other parts of the world and how that, what that looks like. But just from my experience, it's not always a go, go, go type thing.
Yeah.
It's okay, y'all do too much. I can tell you're not from here because you are trying to just do everything. So I just wonder what it would be like in another part of the world when it comes to knowing when it's time to pause, and if that's hard to do. So
yeah. When I go to the Bahamas, it's very like it's Nassau is kind of fast paced a little bit
because
I think they've been Americanized,
right.
to be honest. But it's still a slower pace than what we have here. The
Okay.
roads are slower. I mean, the roads are smaller. There's not this, like, you know, the stores close early on Sundays. Our stores are
Mhm.
starting to close early because nobody wants to work.
Mhm. Well,
But
that's learning
like,
to pause.
yeah, that's
You know what I
learning to
mean?
pause. Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a slower pace, even though it has sped up some. There is a slower pace that I appreciate when I go there. And when I go to the family islands, it's just there's no pace. Like no pace. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that's the thing. Like, they still, life happens.
Right.
It still gets done over
Right.
there. It's still,
Exactly.
um, they're still functioning and moving. And we have this hierarchy that if you don't do X, Y, and Z by 7 a.m. and then by 10 a.m., if you don't have this done, and then by 11, like, it's too much. And everybody does not operate like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, be like, to make that more of a priority, the push and the grind, it's almost like people who are going slow or people who pause are looked down upon.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what I've noticed. And as you brought that up.
Mm-hmm. So I feel like, well, do you want to talk about the repercussions? I feel like we kind of,
I feel like we touched on the repercussions of not taking self-care, because you
yeah.
were saying how, like, you feel it in your knees, you feel it in your back. Like, I mean, we could just do an overview of it. For me, it was the heart palpitations. When I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
taking care of myself, my heart was like, well, heart palpitations are just anxiety.
Right.
But my body was like, no, ma'am.
Yeah.
And for you,
Well, yeah, and the same thing. And I was going to say, I find it interesting that the repercussions end up being physical for a lot of
yes,
people.
for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the other part of self-care that is tricky,
Right.
is that, yes, you can go and get this massage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you can go and, like, um whatever, go for a walk. Like, when I had heart palpitations, my doctor was like, you got to start running again. You got to get active. You have to do something physical to
Mm-hmm.
help your body, or to help, everything to balance. But it wasn't just that.
Right.
Like, the umbrella was missing, the
Mm-hmm.
self-love was missing. I had to
Mm-hmm.
practice intimacy, like the into me I see,
Mm-hmm.
which meant I had to make some tough decisions. As soon as
Mm-hmm.
I decided I wasn't going to grad school, y'all, them heart palpitations never came. They were like, all right,
I'm
yeah.
like, okay, we'll see
They
you
were like,
later.
okay, good. See ya. Thanks.
Right. Yeah.
And that is what it comes down to. Like, yes, it's physically manifested because that's the only way it's going to get our attention.
Yes. Yes.
So then we have to dig into what is underneath this. Like, why do I
Mhm.
actually have these heart palpitations? Like, when I
Mhm.
would go and sit, when I would go and take exams, or when I would go and do my practice tests, or whatever for was it the GMAT? When I was taking practice
LSAT.
tests for that, LSAT, but I
Mhm.
also took the GMAT, I think.
Oh, okay.
Anyways, when I took those practice exams,
Mhm.
it would just, like, I would feel it, like it was almost like a volcano, like it was bubbling.
Mhm.
And the palpitation wasn't there at the time, but it would, like, be bubbling at the surface. And I was
Mm.
like, oh my gosh, it's about to come. And
Mhm.
as soon as I, like, made a decision that I was letting that go, it it left my body. And then I started another practice of yoga, and that helped to continue
Yeah.
to heal it and push it out. But just keep that in mind, y'all. Like, whatever your self-care is, like, if it's the same thing that keeps coming up in your body, there may be something underneath the surface. And maybe you
Mhm.
need to tap into more of the self-love, like the bigger umbrella, to
Mhm.
say, what am I missing?
Right. Yeah.
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 So I think
So
those are our repercussions.
absolutely. So now explain the title of our episode. So we decided to wait until the end of this episode to explain why it's called Heavily Meditated, because we wanted to go through, talking about self-care, talking about self-love, and how this title kind of brings it all together. And Dominique's gonna break it down for y'all.
Yes. So, as y'all know, I've been talking about meditation a lot, and I had a shirt that said Heavily Meditated. And I think I saw the shirt before I was meditating really consistently. And I was like, man, that's kind of cool, because when I first saw it, my brain thought it said heavily medicated. And that is something that we unknowingly, we honor, or we lean more heavily on the medications a lot of times. And it's not to say that medication doesn't have a place. It's not to say that it doesn't work. But it is to say that sometimes we use it in place of trusting our bodies, in place of trusting ourselves. And we get to a place where we are heavily medicated. And sometimes that turns into something that's disastrous, and you have to kind of come back. And sometimes people aren't able to come back from that. And so heavily meditated is just tapping into yourself more heavily. It's tapping into what we talked about, the umbrella, which is self-love, more heavily. So you can understand exactly what your self-care needs to look like. Meditation can be a variety of things. Like Karryll was saying, she painted her house. That is a meditation. If you're doing the same strokes and you're like in that so deeply, that's a meditation. It's a deep focus that you're creating for yourself. If you go out for walks and you go out without any distraction, that's a meditation. There are many forms. For some people, reading their Bible is a form of a meditation. And so understanding that the meditation and the self-love can go hand in hand in helping us to rely more heavily on ourselves instead of the external medication. So that's why we decided to title this episode Heavily Meditated. And the brain probably your brain may have looked at the title quickly and be like, wait, what? Heavily medicated? So we also wanted you to listen. We wanted to get your attention. And so that's why. Yay. Yes. So whatever y'all are doing today, I hope you make it a great, heavily meditated day for yourself. If you are like Karryll and you like to detail your car, go detail your car and make that your meditation for today.
Amen. Yeah.
So thank you all for listening to this episode of the Black Woman Podcast. And before we close, Karryll and I are honoring Black-owned businesses today on this Sunday. Karryll, will you stand up for a second? If you're watching on YouTube, you can see Peace is My Prosperity.
My Peace is My Prosperity.
My Peace is My Prosperity.
And that's our producer's company business.
Yes, Jason Phillips
is a life coach and therapist.
Yes, he is. Life coach, therapist, producer,
podcast
host. Fixes our errors.
Yes.
He's podcast educator.
Everything. Okay.
He's everything for the Black
And soon
Woman
enough,
podcast.
He's gonna be replacing these ceiling fans in this house.
So thank you to the business of My Peace is My Prosperity.
Amen.
And then I have on the sweatshirt from Mess in the Bottle, and it says, I'm just a bad chick with a bald head living life.
Yes.
And I have my bald head.
I love it.
I'm living my life. I'm a bad chick. And also I have on a bracelet from my good friend from college, Marion Green. She owns her own business. She makes amazing bracelets, y'all.
Yes, I have one.
they are custom designed.
Mhm.
And she is very much an energy healer, energy worker. And so every time she produces a bracelet, she produces it from a energy field that is like grounded and centered, and she makes it just for you. So
yes, she's going to be on the podcast as well.
she will also be on the podcast. Yes. And so we will include all of these 3 businesses in the comments or with our episode description, so you can know where to go, because we are all about supporting Black businesses.
Yes, and my earrings is Black business as well. I don't know who it's from, but they Black business. Okay, so
thank you to the Black businesses on this Sunday.
Yes.
So again, thank you for listening to the Black Women Podcast. Please remember to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at the Black Women Podcast. And be sure to check out our website, which is still coming soon, and our YouTube channel. So now you can watch us as well as listen to us on all platforms. If you just want to hear us, you can do that. If you want to see our faces, we would love for you to do that too. If you're watching on YouTube, please, please, please subscribe and like and hit the notification button so you will know when we're doing another episode. Until next time, stay safe and give yourself some grace.
Yes.
Bye, y'all.
Kudos.
See ya.